In the history of Western civilization, few moments have shone as brightly as the 5th century BCE in Athens. It was an era of radical democracy, artistic explosion, and imperial ambition. At its center stood one man, Pericles. But to understand the Golden Age, we must first look at the ashes from which it rose. The story begins not with glory, but with destruction. In 480 BCE, the Persian Empire, led by King Xerxes I, invaded Greece. They breached the defenses at Thermopylae and descended upon Athens, burning the city and its sacred agora to the ground. Although the Greeks eventually triumphed at Salamis and Plataea, forcing the Persians to retreat, Athens was left in ruins. In the aftermath, the immediate task was survival and rebuilding, while the agora, the heart of commercial and civic life, remained in disrepair for decades, possibly due to a sacred oath not to rebuild shrines destroyed by barbarians. Athens turned its eyes outward. In 478 BCE, the Delian League was formed. This was an alliance of Greek city-states intended to defend against future Persian aggression. Athens took the helm, and what began as a defensive coalition slowly transformed into an instrument of Athenian power. During this post-war period, Athenian politics were dominated by Cimon, a wealthy aristocrat and military hero. Cimon favored a conservative policy, maintaining friendship with Sparta and continuing the war against Persia. However, the political ground was shifting. A new generation was rising, one that questioned the old aristocratic order and envisioned a different future for Athens, a future less reliant on Sparta and more focused on the power of the Athenian people. It was in this atmosphere of tension between the old aristocracy and the rising demos that Pericles entered the stage. Pericles was born into privilege. His father, Xanthippus, was a hero of the Persian Wars, and his mother, Agariste, belonged to the powerful Alcmaeonid family. Yet despite his aristocratic lineage, Pericles would become the champion of the common people. He entered politics in the 470s BCE, but his rise truly began with a direct challenge to the old guard. In 463 BCE, young Pericles acted as the prosecutor against the dominant statesman, Cimon, accusing him of neglecting Athenian interests. Although Cimon survived this initial attack, the political tide turned in 461 BCE. This was the year of the Ephialtic Revolution. Pericles allied himself with the radical reformer Ephialtes to dismantle the Areopagus, an ancient council controlled by aristocrats that held significant oversight power. They stripped the Areopagus of its political authority, transferring its powers to the Ecclesia, the assembly of the people, the Council of 500, and the law courts. This moment marked the birth of radical democracy, where the people, not the nobility, held ultimate sway. Following the assassination of Ephialtes shortly after these reforms, Pericles consolidated his position as the unquestioned leader of the democratic faction. He continued to reshape Athenian society to ensure his vision of the state. One of his most defining and controversial moves came in 451 BCE when he introduced the citizenship law. This decree stated that to be an Athenian citizen, a person must be born of both an Athenian father and an Athenian mother. This move made citizenship a more exclusive privilege, tightening the definition of who truly belonged to the polis and strengthening the civic identity of those who remained.
But how did this new democracy function on the ground? Under Pericles, the abstract idea of people power became a bureaucratic reality. The reforms opened the door for ordinary citizens to participate in running their city. Previously, many could not afford to take time off from work to serve on juries or in the council. Pericles introduced misthos, state pay for jury service. This was a revolutionary concept. It meant that the poor could participate in the justice system alongside the wealthy. Democracy in Periclean Athens was direct and physical. The assembly met regularly on the Pnyx Hill, where thousands of male citizens debated foreign policy, laws, and war. While the system was democratic, Thucydides famously noted that Athens was in name a democracy, but in fact ruled by its first citizen. Pericles maintained his influence not through a throne, but through the power of persuasion and his annual election to the board of 10 generals, strategoi. He was the prostates of the demos, the champion of the people. However, this power was never absolute. He faced constant scrutiny and political rivals who utilized the mechanism of ostracism, a vote to exile powerful individuals for 10 years to check ambition. Pericles navigated this volatile environment by articulating a vision that combined democratic equality at home with dominance abroad. He convinced the Athenians that their empire was necessary to fund their democracy and their greatness.
By the mid-5th century, peace had been established with Persia through the Peace of Calais in 449 BCE. With the external threat diminished, Pericles turned his immense energy and the immense wealth of the empire toward the glorification of Athens. In 454 BCE, the treasury of the Delian League was moved from the sacred island of Delos to Athens. Pericles argued that since the Athenians were protecting the allies from the Persians, they were not accountable for how the excess funds were used. Overcoming objections from his political rivals who claimed he was misappropriating public money, Pericles launched the greatest building program the Greek world had ever seen. The Acropolis, still scarred from the Persian invasion decades earlier, was transformed. The Parthenon, dedicated to Athena, rose between 447 and 332 BCE, a masterpiece of marble overseen by Pericles' friend, the sculptor Phidias. Below it, the agora was restored and expanded with new fountains, temples like the Temple of Hephaestus, and the planting of plane trees to provide shade for the citizens. This was not just about bricks and stone, it was an intellectual golden age. Athens became the school of Hellas. Philosophers like Anaxagoras, a close mentor to Pericles, brought new scientific thinking to the city. The theater flourished with the tragedies of Sophocles and Euripides. At the center of this cultural whirlwind was also Aspasia of Miletus, Pericles' brilliant consort. Though she was a foreigner and target of slander, she was an intellectual force in her own right, conversing with Socrates and allegedly even helping Pericles compose his famous speeches. Together, they symbolized a city that valued intellect, beauty, and power above all else.
Yet this golden age carried the seeds of its own destruction. The rapid rise of Athenian power and its transformation of the Delian League into an empire caused alarm in Sparta and other rival states. Pericles famously warned the Athenians that their empire was like a tyranny, perhaps wrong to take, but too dangerous to let go. Diplomatic friction, particularly the Megarian decree and conflicts over Potidaea, eventually ignited the Peloponnesian War in 431 BCE. Pericles advised a strategy of endurance: abandon the countryside, retreat behind the long walls of Athens, and rely on the navy. In the first year of the war, Pericles delivered his famous funeral oration. In this speech, he did not merely mourn the dead, he eulogized the city they died for. He praised Athens for its laws that afforded equal justice, its openness to the world, and its citizens who were lovers of beauty and wisdom. He called upon the survivors to fall in love with their city and its power. But the strategy of crowding the population inside the walls had a catastrophic consequence. In 430 BCE, a plague struck Athens. Originating from the port of Piraeus, it ravaged the overcrowded city, killing perhaps a quarter of the population. The social order collapsed. Bodies piled up in the streets, and traditional morals vanished in the face of indiscriminate death. Pericles himself fell victim to the plague in 429 BCE. He died witnessing the unraveling of the society he had built. Pericles left behind a complicated legacy. He was the architect of a democracy that empowered thousands, yet he financed it through imperial subjugation. He built monuments of eternal beauty, yet his policies led Athens into a war that would ultimately end its golden age. Nevertheless, his vision endured. Even after Athens fell to Sparta years later, the city rose again as an intellectual center. The structures he commissioned still stand on the Acropolis today, and the ideals he articulated of a government where power rests in the hands of the many, not the few, remain the foundation of modern democratic thought. Pericles found Athens a city of brick and left it a city of marble and ideas.
Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that shaped our world.